Hello and welcome to the operational case study pre-scene analysis for the November 2017 exam, where you can see on the screen the company for this pre-scene is Struans of Newland, the ice cream manufacturer. This video series is for those of you taking your operational case study exam in November. If that wasn't completely clear by the intro, then make sure that you're watching the right video series. And of course, this is the company we're doing, Struans of Newland. So my name is James and I'm a co-director here at Struans. Been with the Struans for several years now, and at one time or another I've been involved with pretty much every single aspect of production within the business, including the case study exam, so you're in safe hands with me. Just to go through a few more things, I'm a mock writer, so the case studies, when they started for CIMA back in 2015, we've been doing specialised case study products ever since. One of those are mock exams, and I've written several of the mocks that we've released over the years. And I also consider myself something of a case study expert. Like I say, the case study exam started back in 2015, and ever since then I've been involved in one way or another with pretty much every pre-scene and case study. That's at operational management or strategic level. Been involved in pretty much everyone in one way or another since its inception. So I know a lot about how the case study works, how the pre-scene works, and how the pre-scene sets itself up for the exam later on. In addition to that, I've also actually written a real case study exam for CIMA. Back in 2015, we wrote a CIMA Asia exam that was actually used in a real exam over in the CIMA Asia region. And so not only have I been looking and experienced with case studies for a few years, but I've actually written one as well. So I've wrote the pre-scene, and I know what's involved and how the pre-scene is a really good guide to the kind of things that's going to come up in the exam. And lastly, but certainly not leastly, I'm one of the main study text authors here at Struans, and I've been involved again with pretty much every study text that has come out, and that includes all levels and all pillars. So my actual area of expertise are the finance pillar, so the F1 and F2 study text, but I've worked on the enterprise pillar and the P pillar as well, so there's not really much that I haven't looked at in my time here. I've got a good general all-round knowledge, which is perfect for the case study exams. So what can you expect from this video series? What are we going to do? Why is it worth anything to you? Why is it worth your time? I'm just going to spend a little time here going through exactly what it is we're going to cover in these videos, so you know what you're getting out of it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're really going to take the pre-scene that's been given, and we're just going to go through it with a fine-tooth comb, looking at every little detail as we go through, because as I said, getting to know the pre-scene and having a good understanding of the pre-scene is really the best way to be prepared for the exam. So what particularly we're going to focus on are some of the key points. So as we go through, I'll be making key points, areas that as I read through, I think, well, that's definitely going to be an important thing, and that's almost certainly going to be relevant at some stage in the exam. We're going to be having some industry guidance on how it relates. So I've spent the past few weeks going through everything that I could find on the particular industry that we're involved in on this occasion, and I'm going to be bringing that to the pre-scene and making it relevant and applying it to the scenario, so we have a real world feel for how this all fits together and what kind of things the company are going to be dealing with. We're going to be looking at all the key business models, so of course we're going to be thinking about PESTLE, Porters Forces, all the kind of business models that we can use to assess and analyse the company, their areas of strength, the weaknesses, and how they may go forward in the future, what kind of things you could say in your exam, because often your role is to advise or to give some kind of information. And one of the best ways to do that are using the classic business models. We're going to be picking up likely exam issues. So those first 3 points there, they all kind of feed down into what are likely things to come up in the exam. And like I said, I wrote one of the pre-scenes for an exam a few years ago, And so the best thing to do really when you're approaching the pre-scene is to kind of read between the lines and think, well, CIMA have written this pre-scene, they've made up this company, and it is a real life industry, but it's a made up company, and you've got to think, well, what areas are they setting themselves up for so they can think of exam scenarios when it actually comes to the exam. So if you look at it in that way, think, well, why have they written it like this? Probably because they've got an exam question that they want to ask about that particular area. So as we go through, I'll be picking out areas of the pre-scene that I think are very likely to be coming up in the exam. And as well as that, I'll be giving some exam hints and tips. So at Struans, we've got a couple of study texts and textbooks on specifically how to pass your case study exams, and I was heavily involved in the writing of those, so I know plenty about the exams and the extra little tidbits and tips and things that can help you to get through the exam beyond just pure knowledge and application. In addition to the pre-scene videos, so there's going to be a number of pre-scene videos just looking at the pre-scene, we're going to have a strategic analysis, and that won't necessarily involve looking at the pre-scene in too much more depth. We'll already have covered that. This is kind of a big picture, broader look at the company, where they stand and what they can do going forward. And we'll have a specific video dedicated to the top 10 issues. So I'm going to give you 10 things that I think are very likely to come up in the exam in February based on the things that we'll see in the pre-scene. And there's usually a pretty good track record here at Struans. We're quite proud of the fact that our top 10 issues, more often than not, most of them are things that actually come up in the exam. So that's what you can expect, and here's how it will work. So in the section by section pre-scene videos, I'm going to assume that you haven't seen the pre-scene yet. And you can assume that I haven't really seen it either, because I've been through it a little bit, I've made some notes, but a lot of it we'll be doing as we go through. So you can assume that I'm not going to take any knowledge for granted here. And so what you can do is, before you watch my video and see what I say about it, have a go at reading through it yourself, make some notes, and see how much you can come up with on your own. See how well you do there. And when you've made your own notes, come back to the video and have a look at what I've said, and then maybe see if there's anything that you've missed out or not covered in enough depth, or perhaps there might even be things that you think are good points that I haven't covered myself, and you're welcome to contact us or comment in the section. And you're welcome to leave a comment and perhaps add anything that you think we've missed out. You're perfectly welcome to do that. And at the end, we'll go through the strategic analysis video and the top 10 issues video. So in total, you're looking at, depending on the length of the pre-scene, sort of 8 or 9 videos in total. So just a few quick notes on the actual pre-scene and your approach to the pre-scene actually that I want to make before we start looking at the thing itself. Context is key here, so the whole idea of the pre-scene is to set up this realistic scenario, this realistic world in which this business operates. And so it's important to always think about the context when we're looking at the issues. Don't write a thing based on the pre-scene before the exam. So do go through the pre-scene in a lot of depth and get as much out of it as you can, but don't assume that you can sort of write your answers to questions before you go into the actual exam, because, as you know, we don't know what's going to be in the exam, and you might waste your time focusing on this one particular issue, and that's one of the issues that doesn't come up in the exam. So don't try to write anything based on the pre-scene. Just use it as a way to learn as much as you can about the business so you can be well prepared in the exam. And the real function of the pre-scene, as we said, it's the background. You're really, if you imagine that you are in a real business, for a moment, just suspend disbelief and imagine that you have the actual job of finance officer or whatever it is at this business, and that you're going to be asked to advise or analyze or evaluate certain areas of the business to your boss. So the best way that you would ever be able to do that is to know as much as possible as you can about the business you're working in and the industry they're working in. So that's all this is. The pre-scene is kind of this report that gives you the key information, as much of it as possible, so you can give good answers in the exam. So that's the best approach that I can advise that you take when watching these videos and getting ready for the exam. Okay, so just a quick overview of the plan then for this video series based on these contents here. So in this first video, the plan is to go through these first 3 sections here. So we're just going to be taking a look at the first couple of pages, getting introduced to the company, getting an understanding of what it is they do, how long they've been around for, and perhaps a better idea of kind of their mission and what it is they want to be and their core values. And then in the later videos, we'll be moving on to the other sections. So in video 2, we'll be looking at 4 to 5 here. So the extracts from the organizational chart, company operations. In the third video, we'll be looking at the dairy ice cream industry in New Zealand and the provided SWOT analysis. In video 4, we'll be doing a bit of a split. So what we'll be doing to start with is the extract from the website given, and we'll be doing the press coverage given at the end of the pre-scene. And we'll do those in video 4. In video 5, we're focusing entirely on the financial statements. And then finally in video 6, we'll be looking at the management accounting information and the page given about Newland's tax regime. Okay, and you will be able to access this document that I'm currently making annotations on at the moment. You should get access to that alongside your videos, and so you can refer back to this first page if you want to know which specific video is covering which of these topics. Okay, so this is video 1, so we'll go right ahead and get started by looking at the job description. Okay, so here CIMA have given us a grand total of 3 lines for your job description, so not a great deal of information there, but then there never usually is, having done pre-scene analysis for operational case study many times before. This is pretty standard. But let's take a look at it anyway and see what we can get out of it, so we know what kind of things you should have in mind going into this. So, you know, if you can internalize and get a grip on what your job actually is, you know, going into the exam, what kind of things could be thrown up and things that you're going to have to deal with. So you are a finance officer for Struans of Newland. So this means that you're in the accounting department. You're probably there may be 1 or 2 or 3 finance officers, so you won't be the only one. There'll be a couple of you on that level, and you'll all be reporting to probably a finance manager, who will then report to the finance director. So that's pretty normal, nothing new there going into the exam. That would be the same as any other student that has done this exam for the past couple of years. Another thing that CIMA like to do, in addition to keeping the job description brief, is give a strangely difficult to pronounce name of the company. Now, it's probably not that difficult. I'm going with Struans. Could be Struans or any other pronunciation, we don't know. But CIMA have a habit of making up company names for these pre-scenes that are weird or difficult or unusual names that aren't obvious how to pronounce. Not a point for your exam. Obviously, don't go into your exam saying anything about that, but just a odd thing that CIMA like to do. So your main role is to support the senior finance officer. Okay, so what that tells us is there is you're a finance officer, you've got the senior finance officer, probably been at the company for quite a while, and they'll have their boss and whatever the organizational structure is. We'll get to that in a later video, but essentially you are there as support. And what that really means, let's highlight the word support because this is important going into your exams. You could get questions on pretty much anything that is covered in the E1, P1 or F1 syllabus. So bringing you back to your E1 studies, we know the finance function within a company has many different areas in which it's important to keep things going. So any of those things you could potentially be pulled into in an exam scenario, an exam question scenario. So it could be, you know, you're asked to do some help with the financial reporting, perhaps to advise on how certain kind of assets or class of something is recorded, what the double entry is. It could be something completely different to do with costing or budgeting. And again, it could be something from E1. It could be to do with core values or the mission statement or information systems. There really is no limit to what from the syllabus could be examined here. So what does that mean for you as a student going into the exam? Well, unfortunately, it means you're going to have a pretty good idea of most aspects of the syllabus. However, if you want to really narrow down and only learn the things that are likely to come up in the exam, we do offer a study text. It's the operational case study text, in which we basically have a revision pack for the most likely things to come up in the exam. So rather than going through the entire E1, F1 and P1 syllabus, we've just highlighted, well, here are the normal things that come up based on these exams. And we'll be bringing that up as we go through this pre-scene analysis as well. So things more likely to come up we'll talk about, things less likely to come up, they won't really get mentioned, and it'll be unlikely for them to come up in the exam at all. Okay, so some of your specific duties include the production of the annual budget. Okay, so straight away we know that you're involved in the production of the annual budget. That doesn't mean you're just going to get questions on budgeting. You probably will get a question on budgeting in some form or another. That's a likely area that comes up quite often. But this is just specifics of your job role, and so you would have been involved in the production of the annual budget, and maybe something will come up to do with the budget. But straight away we know that going into this exam, there's an area of P1 that we know you're going to have to be well versed in order to do well in that exam. Okay, so you're also involved in producing the monthly management accounts. So again, that's going to sort of hone in on your P1 subject topics. So your other major P1 topics are costing, obviously that's a big section of the syllabus right there, and variance related to that, and then risk assessment, all those, and in addition with your budgeting, that's a big chunk of your P1. Those are the main things that come up for P1. And the other thing specifically is that you're providing information to management as required, and this is just another way of saying, yeah, well, you know, we've specifically said you work on the budget, the management accounts, but you provide information as required. So there's no reason why you shouldn't expect something to come up with, you know, the classification of tangible assets, or, you know, how to deal with some kind of tax scenario, etc., etc. Those would be F1 examples of F1 topics. And of course, the F1 topics are likely to come from within your kind of domain as a financial officer, and perhaps your senior will give you financial accounting things. But E1 topics are just as examinable as well, and they may come from other areas of the company. So perhaps other directors may have certain tasks for you, and that will come from other parts of the company, but you're still going to have to do that. So you might get an E1 sort of question around information systems, or around, you know, mission statements or values or stakeholders or anything like that. And in fact, the interesting thing about the operational case study, a large part of it is made up of technical marks, so you will have to know your basic P1 and F1 and E1 stuff. But there's also an element of it which is sort of being business savvy and having business acumen, and that's going to require thinking about E1 topics all the way through. So all the way through these pre-scenes, and when you're in the exam, you need to be thinking about stakeholders, you need to be thinking about corporate social responsibility, and you need to be thinking about ethics as well, which is a topic that comes up in all areas, in E1 and F1 as well. So these are the kind of things you need to make sure that those are in your mind, even if it's clearly an F1 topic and you're writing about, you know, corporation tax, or, you know, whatever it is. A highly technical topic, and you're getting bogged down in the details, but at the same time you must be thinking about stakeholders and some of your E1 and core E1 topics, because that shows you have the ability to have a wider understanding of how a business operates within an industry, and not just focus on one element. The examiner is looking for, you know, that kind of attitude, those kind of responses from students. Okay, so considering that was only 3 lines of information, there's actually a surprising amount of relative information you can get from that. If you look close enough and you sort of look at implications, reading between the lines, we've managed to get quite a lot out of that. And, you know, we've kind of building up a good foundation for what kind of knowledge, background, understanding we need to have when going into the exam. All right, so let's move on now to the first page of information that we get about the company in the company background. Okay, so the strategy here is to just take it one paragraph at a time, and what we're looking for is key information, anything that's going to help us prepare for the exam. Okay, so Struans is a family business based in Milltown in the country of Newland. Okay, so straight away, knowing that it's a family business, there's a few things we can assume. We may be incorrect as we'll go through, we'll find out more, but just knowing that it's a family business probably means there's going to be a certain kind of organisational structure at play here. Okay, so at this stage, these are just assumptions, but I think they're fair assumptions to make. Obviously, this isn't going to be true of every family business, of course, but in this case, it's because it's a made-up company in a pre-seen exam by CIMA, then there's a reason they're including this information. They make it a family business so they can give you areas to examine. So with family businesses, you get a certain kind of organizational structure. Usually they're less formal or less corporate. They're a bit perhaps more organic in the way that they've grown. Perhaps they've been around for a long time and it's passed on from father to son, mother to daughter, etc. So there's been perhaps less of a kind of logical business corporate approach to it. And that may lead to problems. Perhaps certain areas of the business have been overlooked. For instance, there may not be a dedicated HR function, or their technology or IT may be underdeveloped. They may have no clear mission or goals, values, all those kind of things that you get with a full corporate environment where all areas have been considered. With a family business, that tends to be overlooked sometimes. Obviously, not necessarily the case all the time, but a possibility here. And so, yeah, we may have questions over things like corporate governance too, since it's a family business. If it's completely private, etc., corporate governance isn't going to be a massive issue in and of itself, except for it helps the company if they ever want to go public. Ethical questions and stakeholders are going to depend on how the company is structured and who the key stakeholders are, and we'll get to that later on. So the company is based at Milltown in the country of Newland. These are both made up by CIMA. There's nothing much we can guess from this. Newland's currency is the Newland dollar. So we can just assume, for the sake of argument, that it's kind of Western. The country Newland is a sort of westernized democratic country. Just for the sake of argument, it's something similar to what you'd get in a European country, perhaps North America or Australia. Those kind of places. We're basing this on less Asia or South America or whatever it is. It's just to keep it simple. It's probably very similar to the UK. Company was founded in 1912, which makes it 105 years old. Which means it's quite an old country. It's been around for a while, and the implication there is that it's seen a lot of changes in its industry. Even an industry such as dairy farming, producing ice cream, hasn't changed massively perhaps in the last 100 years or so, but the market and the industry has definitely seen changes, as all industries have seen change in the last century due to changes in technology and the increase of disposable income amongst your average working class and middle classes. All those kind of factors are going to have an impact on even something like ice cream. So they've been around for a long time, which means they've been able to weather the storm, whatever storm that has been. And they've diversified from dairy farming into milk retailing, and then they've recently made a move into making dairy ice cream. So there are the three main things that our company has done over time. So they started off dairy farming, which would have been a quite different practice to what it is they were doing now, because obviously making dairy ice cream, you're going to need to get your dairy from somewhere, of course. But
dairy farming alone is quite different to then moving into manufacturing ice cream and then retailing that. So they've gone through some significant changes in the last 100 years is the point I'm trying to make here. And in the 1930s, the developing dairy farm as it was at Milltown moved into milk retailing. So it was exclusively dairy farming at one stage, and it moved into milk retailing and became a substantial milk processing and retailing business. So that's a significant shift for the business right there. And that was back in the 1930s. Now the question sort of bubbling to the surface at this stage is whether or not how much of this is down to luck and the company's ability to adapt to the changes that are being thrown up. Now, obviously, back in the 1930s and the early 20th century, the people running it, you're talking about the grandparents or the great-grandparents of whoever is running it now. So the different people, the company's going to change, especially a family business. It's going to be a lot to do with the personality of the person in charge. However, it does seem that historically the company has had a willingness to change perhaps their core values. Perhaps they went into the business to be a milk retailer, perhaps they were farmers or something like that. But they've been willing to change and adapt with the times into becoming something quite different. But they still seem to be successful in doing well. So that's perhaps something we can glean from this. Okay, so in the 1930s up until the 80s, the mid-80s, so a good period of good 50 years there, the company found themselves with a surplus of cream. And as a result of the market shift from full cream milk to semi-skimmed milk, so we were talking earlier about how every industry has been affected over the last 100 years. So in the mid-80s, there was a shift from full cream to semi-skimmed milk related to health consciousness, and that there was a boom in the 80s of being more health conscious, more aware of what it is you're eating, and that carries over even to today. So they had a surplus of cream. An investment was made in dairy ice cream manufacturing equipment. So it was in the mid-80s that they made this shift from purely processing milk to being a manufacturer. And what they've done there, as we've said, they've made the best of a bad situation. So they found themselves, they've been in business for 50 years or so, and they're manufacturing, processing milk and selling that. Suddenly the market changes and people don't want full fat milk anymore, they want semi-skimmed, and so the company's like, well, we've got all this extra cream, this surplus of cream, what can we do with it? And they managed to turn that into a good situation. They've gone into down manufacturing ice cream, which is what presumably they're known for today, as that's their logo, is the ice cream thing. So these little accidents is a good example of how a business open to change, willing to try something new, can succeed, as long as they've got that openness. And that's the sense that you're getting from this company so far. So the dairy ice cream operation started as a small local business, so it started small as it always does, with the dairy ice cream being made in the mornings and sold in the local area in the afternoon. The operation rapidly expanded. Obviously it was very popular and they were doing something right, resulting in all the milk produced on the farm being used in the production of dairy ice cream. So there again we see another example of where we had a company starting off, they were a dairy farm, they moved into milk processing and retailing business, but when the market changed its mind and it found itself with an opportunity here which presented itself as an issue, remember this was possibly a threat, we've got all this excess product, we can't shift it, what are we going to do? We try making ice cream. That risk, that chance turned into a whole other thing, and now they use all of their milk in producing ice cream. So it completely changed their business, but that openness to change is why they've succeeded. And I might be harping on and banging home the point a little bit too much here, but this is important to remember going into the exam. This is probably part of their culture, and we need to make sure that we're kind of aware of that when we're writing our responses in the exam. So if we get questions, it's going to be a good thing for you to have in mind that, okay, we've had problems in the past before, but we always, we tried new things and we adapted our business to the new threat that we were facing. So they had a good response to that. And, something like this could come up in the exam again. We're faced with a serious threat, and rather than, panicking or not knowing what to do or shutting down the business, etc., whatever it might be, you think, okay, well, we've dealt with this before. We need to just be willing and open to change our business to adapt to what what needs to be done in the market. Okay, so Struans dairy ice cream is now well established as a leading premium dairy ice cream brand in Newland. So they went from, the mid-80s to not making ice cream at all to today, 30 years later, and they're the leading premium dairy ice cream brand in Newland. Recognised for its high quality and innovative flavours. So there we have two key aspects of how this company is marketing themselves. And that brings us back, of course, to E1 and marketing. Now, we don't know yet, but high quality and innovative flavours, that usually means that they're going to be a luxury provider of ice cream. They're not going to be sort of value or budget ice creams that you can get for cheap. They're probably going to be a nicer, sort of more luxurious ice creams that are higher priced, but the high quality as well. So, and they're obviously well established in the country, so they obviously managed to get this balance right. So the company produces over 11 million litres of dairy ice cream per year, generating revenue of $21 million. We don't know for which year this is. We can presume we'll see this in the financial statements when we get to that video. But obviously $21 million is what's generated for 11 million litres. That works out at approximately $2 per litre, the revenue they're making. Something like 1.9 something. So we can just round it up, say it's roughly $2 per litre in revenue they're generating per litre of ice cream. Now, we don't know anything about, the relative strength or value of the N dollar with regards to currencies we are familiar with. So say the pound, obviously you'd be unlikely to get a litre of high quality luxury ice cream in the United Kingdom for £2. So we could presume there's not a kind of close relationship between those. But what we do know from this is that if per litre on average, this company are generating $2 per litre, then the cost associating with producing a litre of ice cream better be significantly lower than $2. So there are 4 different ranges of ice cream that they provide, and those are in several tub sizes and flavours. So on the whole, we're probably talking about whole product line, whole variants of different ice creams that they're producing, but they are all still ice cream. So they are still staying within this one relatively small part of the market. All they do is produce ice cream at that stage. Now, there is perhaps an argument to be made here that just one kind of product, although many companies just do one kind of product, potentially a lack of diversification there in putting all of your energy into making one thing. If something suddenly happens, something major happens, and the popularity of ice cream just takes a huge dip, then the company are going to be significantly damaged by that, and they've got no other backup, as far as we know yet. Anyway, no other ways of bringing in revenue other than making ice cream. Presuming, obviously, that they're all geared up for making ice cream. We know that historically they were able to make milk, so presumably they could go back to making milk or just farming as well. So those are potential backups if something goes wrong with the ice cream industry. So the ice cream produced by the company falls within the industry category of bulk. This is because the smallest tub size they sell is 500 milliliters, so half a litre. Now, 500 milliliters isn't actually that big, even though it is classified as bulk. If you go into any supermarket and you pick up a pot of Haagen-Dazs or Ben & Jerry's or any of those little pots that you can get, they're usually around about 500 milliliters. So it's smaller than the kind of big tubs that you might be used to getting, which might be 1 or 2 litres. So this is kind of just a technicality that is considered to be bulk because they do no less than 500 milliliters. The most popular range of ice cream that they produce is a single flavour, with traditional vanilla being the favourite. So as kind of expected, the most popular ice cream they do is vanilla. And they do other ranges as well. So they do multiple flavoured dairy ice creams. dairy ice cream with chunks such as honeycomb and jelly beans, and exotic fruit dairy ice cream as well. So again, the kind of standard range of things that you would expect from a company such as Ben & Jerry's or Haagen-Dazs. And obviously, if this were a real-life company, these would be the two key competitors. Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs are the two internationally well-known manufacturers of this luxury ice cream that comes in tubs. Seems like this company is very similar to kind of an amalgamation of both of those two. So, but yeah, obviously in the pre-scene world, the world of this, Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs might not exist, so they might not actually be competitors. But keep in mind that there might be a similar kind of thing, rivalry perhaps between our company Struans and some other company, and it's kind of like the rivalry between Ben & Jerry's and Haagen-Dazs, something like that. The company has become well known for the innovative and interesting flavors which they have continuously developed over the years. So this makes it sound more like Ben & Jerry's than Haagen-Dazs. Ben & Jerry's are known for their kind of wild, crazy mixes of different things into ice cream. This kind of cookie dough ice cream and fish food which has got marshmallows in it and these caramel, all these crazy different combinations of ice cream, really popular. And this sounds more like they're more like Ben & Jerry's than Haagen-Dazs. Haagen-Dazs are a bit more sort of luxurious, typical, classy, perhaps more, I always get the sense they're more of a European, even though they're an American company, they have a kind of more European, because of the name, it sounds like a Swiss company or something like that. Ben & Jerry's is kind of like America squared. Okay, moving on then. The dairy ice cream is produced on the family's renewable energy powered dairy farm. That's nice and interesting, isn't it? Because that brings up renewable energy and how they're powering their plant, how they're powering their operations, and they're using renewable energy. And we know that that's going to bring up things with ethics and environmental concerns, and that's going to relate to stakeholders and keeping people happy. So there's loads of stuff there straight away that we know could come up. And as we go on, this will be kind of narrowed down, and we'll be able to pick out key things. So we'll learn more about their approach to renewable energy and what it is they're doing. And that will, by the end of this video series, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what kind of questions are going to come up with regards to this. And of course, it relates to pestle as well. So pestle analysis, one of the key analysis techniques from our E1 studies. One of the standard models, and we'll be perhaps using that again as we go through, and that's certainly part of the strategic analysis video, which you can get in addition to this video series. So just as a quick reminder, pestle is an acronym. The P stands for political, you've got E for economical, S for social, T for technology, E for environmental, again, so there's two E's. You add economy for one and environment for one, and L is for legal issues. So renewable energy is going to come under the environmental E, but there's been lots of other things as well. As we'll go through, we'll be relating back to pestle and what things we can consider to put in our pestle analysis, and we'll be doing a full pestle analysis in the strategic analysis video. So a topic that could come up for renewable energy, one thing that has come up in exams before, is the fact that using certain, shall we say, green or environmentally friendly non-current assets from a financial accounting, that gets certain tax breaks, and they might get capital allowances or something like that in their first year. We know that's a topic from F1, so you'd be foolish to go into this exam not having looked at capital gains allowances and at how to account for those regarding renewable energy, because that is quite easily a question that could come up. Okay, so the 1,500 acre farm supports a 450 cow dairy herd, which supplies fresh cream and milk for their dairy ice cream. So the dairy ice cream operation now employs over 60 staff, many of whom have been working for the family for over 20 years. So let's unpack this a little bit. So they have a 1,500 acre farm and 450 cow dairy. and that provides the fresh cream and milk for the dairy ice cream. So this just clears up the question we had earlier, was whether or not they have just one kind of product. Is there anything else they could fall back on? Well, they have these cows and they have the farm, so they could potentially fall back on to something else. But at the moment, it looks like all of their productive output or input is going into the production of dairy ice cream. The ice cream operation employs over 60 staff, so that's obviously reasonable size staff, but still actually quite a small company on the whole. As we said, it was a family company. We expected it to be more informal perhaps, and there's only 60 staff, so there's a good chance here that it's quite a informal, small company. And all the issues that we had before, the kind of questions over corporate governance, or it's a less corporate environment, they seem to be affirmed here. Many of them have been working for the family for over 20 years. So the other thing that this brings up then is managing stakeholders. One of the key stakeholders, as always, is going to be your employees. And when you've got a small company with 60 staff, each individual plays a bigger role in the operations of the company. And if some of them have been there for a long, long time, then they're going to be a very important stakeholder, because they're an important part of what keeps the business going. And it's likely a part of the company's appeal if they sort of market themselves as, we're a family company, we keep things local, we employ these people who've been working for us for 20 years, we've got good relationships with our staff, then that's going to be, that's a positive marketing thing, and they may use that, and that might be a reason why they're popular in the country in which they operate. And the final paragraph on this page then, so successive generations of the Struan family have developed the business. The current generation is actively involved in the business. Gavin Struan, the managing director, okay, so we know who the managing director is a popular local businessman. He's been pivotal in driving the growth of the company and ensuring its long-term survival through regularly updating its range of flavours. His siblings Ian, James and Hannah all hold senior management positions in the company. So again, let's take a look at the relevance of this information here. So a key question for me at this stage is, how long has Gavin been the managing director? Was he around, in the 80s when it switched over to purely ice cream manufacturing? Was he behind that innovation? If so, we know the guy in charge is someone who's open to change. Or was that perhaps his father or some other relative and that happened before he was the managing director? But whether or not whatever the case is there, we know he's a popular local businessman, and he's also open to innovation and trying all these new flavours, and he's considered to be really important in the long-term survival of the company. So we've obviously got someone in charge here who seems to be very capable and knows what they're doing, whether or not they have any corporate business background or anything like that. And we know that the whole family are involved as well. So Gavin and his siblings, Ian, James and Hannah, they all hold senior management positions in the company. So it truly is a real family business. And there's nothing wrong with that at all. That could be completely fine. But since this is CIMA, since this is a made-up exam, and you kind of go into this thinking, okay, CIMA, you've written this in this way. Why have you written this like this? Obviously, you've got some questions in mind for the actual exams. Well, here, what I'm thinking is, because this is such a small family business, the main areas of issues in E1 are going to be around organisational, structure, and whether or not company are meeting all of the sort of basic elements of corporate governance and structure, and making sure there's no nepotism or cronyism, or they're not overlooking certain areas of the business because they're a family business and they're perhaps not educated in, kind of the things that you're learning as a CIMA student going through your different studies. They're not going to have the benefit of that theory and knowledge. And so there might be certain areas of the business that are overlooked, like we mentioned earlier, such as HR, or the technology is out of date, etc. All of that may be, completely undue worry, but, reading between the lines here, it seems like this is an area that CIMA are setting up so that they can ask questions in the exam on this. Okay, so that's it for this page. We'll carry on with the next page, and that will be the end of the video. So just these first 3 pages. Okay, so this section, the final section for this video, is all about the product. Okay, and so we find here that the ingredients of the ice cream are to a certain extent determined by Newland's government legislation. So there we go, there's another factor to consider for a pestle analysis. Okay, so in this case we would, under the legal aspect of pestle, we would have to consider the impact of the government legislation on the kind of ingredients used in the ice cream. So at the moment, the legislation says that in order to use the term ice cream, the mix of ingredients must contain a minimum of 5% dairy fat. Okay, and just glancing at the table below here, we can see that for the company, that looks like there are 5 main ingredients, and so dairy fat is one of the major ingredients in making ice cream. So to call it ice cream, it needs to be 5% dairy fat. To use the term, that's ice cream, is 5%. To use dairy ice cream, the mix of ingredients must contain at least 10% dairy fat. Most premium ice cream usually contains somewhere between 10% and 16% dairy fat. However, those of the highest quality will contain around 20% dairy fat. So a typical dairy ice cream mix contains the following ingredient percentages by weight. So let's have a look here at what ice cream is usually made up of. So we know that about dairy fat. Okay, so dairy fat is actually the cream or the butter fat. So only 10 to 16% of ice cream is made up of dairy fat. Sometimes it's 20%. And remember that this is a typical dairy ice cream. This isn't necessarily information about the ice cream that Struans makes. This is just typical dairy ice cream. So around a tenth to a fifth is cream or butter fat, and then there are the milk solids. And the milk solids are the dried skimmed milk or condensed milk, and that's around another 10%. Sweeteners are sucrose, liquid glucose, or liquid cane sugar. That makes up 12 to 16%. Stabilizers and emulsifiers, that's all these kind of things here that alginates, gums and gelatins, egg yolks and diglycerides make up a very, very, less than 0.5%, or 0.5% or less made up by this. And shockingly, a large proportion of the ice cream is made up from water, so 55 to 64% from the milk and other ingredients. Now, that's for those of you who know about ice cream, that may not be a surprise. It's kind of a surprise to me that so much of it is made up from water, but this is a typical dairy ice cream, and so there's nothing going on here. The only way that there would be any issues would be to find out if our company Struans is making ice cream with a significantly higher amount of water, or there might be an issue around. I mean, we're given all this information. The fact that Struans call their ice cream dairy ice cream, but if any of their ice creams were found to have less than 10% dairy fat, then there would potentially be another legal issue around it, because it's false advertising, not advertising it as it actually is. So that's something that they're going to have to be really careful about. But it's possibly something that could come up in the exam as well. So someone found, or some company did research and found that certain ice cream manufacturers weren't accurately stating what the proportions of what make up their ice cream, and that can obviously harm a company's reputation. So something like that could easily come up in the exam. Okay, the other thing that we can get from this is basically a list of all the main products or ingredients that Struans need to make sure that they have to make their ice cream. So we know that they've got dairy farm, the cows are 450 cows, I think it was. So they can obviously make a lot of this themselves, the cream and the butter fat and the semi-skimmed milk. But these other things, so the alginates, the gums, gelatins, egg yolks, or the liquid glucose, etc., these are things that they may or may not be making themselves. So these are things that, parts of the production process that they're going to have to buy in these things in order to make, or they may make them themselves, we don't know yet. To this basic mix are added flavorings and chunks to produce a variety of different ice creams. So in addition to all these, all the different main ingredients that are used in the production process, we also have added flavorings and chunks. So, we've got cookie dough ice cream. They mentioned a jelly bean and all sorts of different things that you can add to ice cream these days. So this is another issue with, potentially supplier management and making sure that the various things that they need. Say the company want to introduce a new line of ice cream and it's got some new chunk or flavoring in it, and they haven't got any suppliers or any relationships with anyone that can supply those things. That's going to need to find a new supplier, or perhaps all the kind of things that come up with that. So again, just coming up with just thinking of things as we go through this, possible areas for the examiner to think of questions. Okay, so in the next paragraph we learn a bit about the manufacturing process. So during the freezing process, air is incorporated into the ice cream mix, and the addition of air increases the volume but not the weight of the dairy ice cream. This has an industry term. It's known as overrun, and it's defined as the percentage increase in the volume of dairy ice cream obtained. So it gives you an example here. If you start off with 1 litre of mix and you make 1.5 litres of dairy ice cream, you have increased by a volume of 50%, which means you've got a 50% overrun in that case. Okay, so this is another area that needs quite close monitoring. So obviously you're increasing the amount of litres, you're increasing the volume, and that's what you're selling it by volume. So you don't sell a certain weight of ice cream, you're actually selling a volume. So if you've pumped a load of air into it and you've made something that was initially 1 litre, and you can pump enough air in it to make 3 litres, obviously you're reducing the overall amount of actual ice cream in it, and it's more air. So there's potential issues around that regarding falsely decreasing the overall amount of ice cream you're getting per tub, even though the volume is increasing, and presumably that's going to reduce the quality. And it kind of relates to a bunch of scandals we've had around this in the past few years, around products being, they're getting smaller, or the companies changed slightly little bits of aspects of the product over time, and customers kind of get fed up of it, and they think, there's nothing left of it. One example is the fact a lot of confectionery manufacturers in the UK, so Cadbury's and Mars and all those kind of companies, they make their bars or they make their chocolates or whatever slightly smaller, and they're charging the same amount for it. And that's actually a pricing strategy to keep your price the same and actually reduce the amount that is actually being sold per unit. But that's perhaps a little bit of a digression at this stage, so apologies for that. Let's get on with the rest of what's given here. So, in general terms, the amount of overrun will vary with the quality of the product. So kind of what we were just saying there about if you have too much overrun, then the quality of the product is going to come down and you may get customers complaining. With higher quality products having lower overrun percentages, average overrun is around 35%. But it can be as much as 50% for soft ice cream. Now, we don't know yet what the figures are, any of these figures are for Struans. We don't know their overrun. We don't know what percentage of their ice cream is dairy fat. But we can presume that, since they're called dairy ice cream, that they have a high percentage of dairy fat. But we don't know about overrun or what their approach is to that. That'll be something to keep an eye on. And that might be an area that we can improve or look at. In an exam question. It might be an area that, how can we look at our overrun or the way that we make our product in order to improve revenues or to increase our profit margin, etc., to do with, the way we're costing things and pricing things. It might be a big question like that, and it all could base it all around, the overrun or the way of getting a bit more revenue per litre or something like that. Because remember, at the moment, we're getting $2 per litre on average, so it could be a question. Oh, okay. At the bottom then, after all that, after all my doubt and saying we don't know, Struans manufactures high-quality premium dairy ice cream with 21% dairy fat. So just going back to what we had at the beginning, dairy fat, a typical dairy ice cream, remember that's dairy ice cream and not just ice cream. So typical dairy ice cream will range from 10 to 16%, sometimes 21% in this case. Struans is 21%, so they're well within the category for dairy fat. And in fact, if anything, they could potentially reduce the amount of dairy fat. Now, we don't know about the cost of this, whether or not it's expensive, etc., or it's to do with taste or preference, but they could potentially reduce the amount of dairy fat in their ice cream by up to 10%. And it could still be classed as dairy ice cream. Now, obviously, there's a lot of other issues with that could come up. The way that they're marketing their products, there would be issues around calling it high quality premium dairy ice cream. If it was a lower dairy fat, the customers may be angry that, you know, the quality of the ice cream has gone down. That's going to affect all sorts of things. So obviously it's not as simple as saying, well, that's to reduce the dairy fat to save some money or increase revenues, but a scenario like that could be the kind of through line for an entire exam. So these are the kind of things that could come up in exams, just to keep giving you examples of what to expect when you're actually coming into it. And in a similar kind of way, their overrun is 20%, which we learned earlier that the average overrun is around 35%, so they're far below this at 20%. And again, the question could be, could they increase their overrun without, you know, impacting all the other areas and having an overall negative impact? Would it be worth increasing their overrun to, you know, increase the volume of ice cream, etc., bring in more revenues, you know, those kind of things? Or is that something that's they're firmly against? Do they have like very strong core traditional values for the quality of their product? And these are the kind of questions we'll be hoping to answer as we go through further. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the information that we're going to look at in this video, but the video isn't over yet. What we like to do at the end of a video, certainly the first video, is to get you to have a go at a SWOT analysis. Now, SWOT analysis is one of the key models that we can use from E1 to give us a good overview of how a company is doing and where it sort of gives us an idea of where the company is and perhaps what it faces in the foreseeable future. So for those of you who don't recall, SWOT is another acronym, and it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And essentially all you need to do is you can draw a kind of two-lined, like a graph, line down the middle and line across, giving you 4 quadrants. You have strengths in one quadrant, weaknesses in the other, opportunities and threats in the others. And basically you're writing down the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So if you're thinking about strengths and weaknesses, what you're looking at are things internal to the company. What specifically about the company is a strength for them? What are they doing right? What makes them good and competitive? What makes them successful? And on the other hand, what about them is a drawback, potentially holding them back, or could see them being less successful in the future if they don't change this aspect of themselves. So that's for strengths and weaknesses. And then on the other side, you've got opportunities and threats, and these are thought of as external factors to the company. Okay, so for opportunities, what things outside of the company could they potentially get involved in or do or take advantage of in order to become more successful? What could make them be better? What outside opportunities are there? And the same thing goes for threats. So what things outside of the company, perhaps industry trends or other competitors or whatever it is, what external threats could have an impact on the company? And the idea with opportunities and threats is, well, for all of them, is to come up with strategies for overcoming weaknesses and avoiding threats and making sure that you take opportunities. Now, a SWOT analysis is usually done with a lot more information than what we've been given so far, but it's good to do it sort of regularly, and perhaps we'll do it again in some later videos and revise what we initially had once we get a clearer picture of how the company is. So what I'd like you to do now is pause the video and take 5 minutes, 10 minutes, however long you need, and jot some ideas down for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Do your SWOT analysis, then come back to the video and I'll have done one as well, and you compare what you have with what I have, and perhaps I'll have caught some things that you didn't get, and perhaps you'll have picked up on some things that I didn't get as well, and there's nothing wrong with that. And perhaps you can leave a comment or get in touch in the forums that we have for these videos and have a chat about it in there. Okay, so go ahead, pause the video now, and we'll come back and take a look at your SWOT analysis. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you've got something down for your SWOT analysis. So we'll get started with what I've got. So for strengths, starting with strengths at S in our top quadrant here, I've got 3 main things written down. Firstly, we've got innovative. So there was an emphasis to me on the company being innovative and pushing the envelope and trying to come up with new kinds of ice creams, and the manager seems to be the managing director seems to be very open to developing new ideas, and so I think that's definitely a strength for them, is that they're willing to be innovative. In addition, they're well established. They've been around for more than 100 years, and they've managed to get a place within the current market as, you know, one of the top manufacturers of premium dairy ice cream in the country. So they're a well-known brand and they're successful. They're not just a small family business that are only popular in some local area of the country. Finally, I almost didn't include this, but I think it's worth mentioning because it does seem a relevant point looking at their history. They seem to be resilient. They seem to be open to changing with the times and changing themselves in order to keep up with how the world around them is changing. So obviously they went from being just a dairy farmer to being a milk manufacturer and retailer, and now they're making ice cream. So they're resilient. They've faced challenges in the market, and they've managed to keep up with it and keep going, and that's the next strength for them, willing to do that. Okay, so we'll move on now and consider some weaknesses. So for weaknesses, one I've got down is issues around it being a family business. Now I do want to stress before going into this that there is nothing wrong with it being a family business. In the real world, there are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of family businesses that are run perfectly well, and there's nothing wrong with it. But within the context of this exam, in a CIMA exam, we need to be looking between the lines a little bit, and I think what CIMA are doing here is setting us up for questions to do with corporate governance and perhaps ethics and corporate social responsibilities. It might be that the company does all of these things well, but there is a tendency for small family businesses to have a less well-developed approach to these areas of the company. Another one is a lack of diversification. So this is something we talked about earlier, the fact that all they do at the moment is produce a range of luxury ice creams. Now that seems to be doing well for them at the moment, and in the past we've seen that they are open to change, they're resilient and innovative, but at the moment, if something drastically or quickly happened to the ice cream market or industry, and then they would have to quickly, change once again to be able to, keep operating and not start losing lots of money because of something that's gone wrong. They've got no other products straight away that they can just rely on the income from that. So there's potentially a lack of diversification there. Possible opportunities. Now, there wasn't a great deal to go on at the moment because we've got such limited information, but just going on what we had, I've put down the dairy fat level and overall, which we just talked about a moment ago. There's possibility for them to experiment there with, or to at least look into and consider changing the level of their dairy fat or their overrun, and reflecting that perhaps in pricing and costing to see if they can boost their profits or their revenue or something like that. And it doesn't mean doing that for existing lines. They could introduce new lines of ice cream and do that to prevent damaging their existing, the reputation of their existing products. And finally, we'll take a look at threats. Again, there wasn't a great deal of information to go on for threats, but a few things we got jotted down here are competitors. Now, there's no mention of any competitors so far, but there's almost certainly going to be some. We mentioned, briefly in passing, the rivalry between Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's. There may be a similar kind of thing going on here between Struans and someone else. There's definitely going to be competitors, and that could potentially be a threat for them. The other thing was legislation. So it mentioned at the top of this page that there's certain, governmental legislation requiring the definition of dairy ice cream. And, if that were to change, that could be higher or lower. That's not only going to impact individually Struans, but it could impact the whole, all the companies involved in the ice cream industry. Other companies might be taking advantage of it, having the minimum amount that you could have that, that actually counts as dairy ice cream, and then selling it as if it is dairy ice cream, etc. So there's all these other things, and there's a potential threat there. So just thinking about the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Perhaps you've got some overlap with mine. Perhaps you've got some different things. As we said, that's fine, and you can head over to the forums to chat about any of those if you want to. So what might we do to overcome some of these weaknesses or take advantage of opportunities and threats? Well, for weaknesses, I would perhaps suggest, and by the way, this is a good idea of getting into the head of the examiner and the kind of things that they are likely to ask questions on. Though there may be nothing wrong with it whatsoever, it would be good perhaps to review the company's governance and structure, considering it's a family business, and there might be things we can do to improve it overall. The lack of diversification issue, a sort of general solution to that is going to be other products. So it could be, since they've got the cows and the farm already, they could look into making other things that are sort of related, but perhaps in different areas to ice cream. So, just selling milk again, or milkshakes, or providing, business to business kind of relationship selling, providing to other businesses, other ice cream manufacturers, or, milkshake manufacturers, etc. So just getting into other areas with what they've already got to make sure they're not just all dependent on this one area. Opportunities, what could they take advantage of? Well, we've already spoken about this, and they could perhaps, like we said, think about what the ways of manipulating the dairy fat level and the overrun to their best advantage. How do they avoid threats? Well, we don't know about the competitors at the moment. It's just important for them to keep an eye on competitors, keep an eye on the sort of competitivity of the market in which, or the industry in which they operate, and to stay up to date with any sort of upcoming legislation or changes in the political sort of attitude of the company. Okay, so hopefully that helped you with your understanding, or gave you a good, broader understanding of where the company is at the moment. And not only that, but perhaps it's given you sort of an idea of how to approach analysing the pre-scene and what kind of attitude to have when going into the exam, sort of above and beyond sort of the studying of knowing your F1, P1 and E1, what kind of additional things are going to help you when going into your exam. So that is it for the first video. Hope you enjoyed that and got something from that. And I hope to see you again in the next video.
All that remains for me to say is thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something out of it. And I'll just take a few moments of your time, if I could, to just tell you about some of the other case study materials that we offer. So one of the things is a study text. Now this is a study text specifically aimed at the case study, and we have one for each level. So we have an operational, management and strategic level one, and they're designed to help you pass the study. They're in two halves. The first half is exam tips and exam strategy and advice on how to answer questions and all the really useful kind of tips that you need going into these exams and how to prepare for them. And then the second half, the second part of those, is a recap of the key theory that always comes up in the case studies again and again. So those are really useful, really valuable thing that you can get. Those are available online, and you can get an actual textbook, a print physical textbook for the old-fashioned among you who like to do it that way still. We also have course videos that correspond with that study text as well. So we have a series of really nicely well produced, well done videos in which we basically take you through exactly what's involved in the case study and how you can spend your time preparing for it to ensure that you get really good marks. It's really great series of videos there. We've got the pre-scene analysis, which the video you just watched is an example of the pre-scene analysis, and there'll be several more videos just like that where we look at every tiny detail of the pre-scene and we relate it back to the P1 or F1 or E1, and we relate it to real life scenarios, relate it to actual business and analysis tools, and we give you the what we expect to be the top 10 issues. Another thing that we do is slightly different is the industry analysis, and that is this is a really great document in which we basically cover everything that's relevant to the industry for the particular business that we're looking at. And it goes from their history through to the customers and suppliers and the market and how the market has functioned and the history of that. And we've got statistics in there and diagrams, and it's full of information. It's so useful. And at the end of that pack, we also have 25 actual industry examples. So real life things that have happened in that industry that kind of examples of things that might actually happen to the company in the exam. So it gives you a sense of the kind of things that are going on in the industry and how real life businesses in that industry have coped with it. We have mock exams, which are, if you were going to pick any one of these to do, I would suggest it was the mock exams, because nothing prepares you for the exam more than actually sitting a mock exam. And if I were a student taking this, I would certainly put mock exams at the top of my list, along with marking and feedback. Now, our mock exams are actually designed to match the way that the actual CIMA exams are, so you can sit them on your laptop and they'll be timed and automatic, and they are as close as you are going to get to the real thing. And you can get marking and feedback on that as well, which is probably the most valuable thing you could probably get. To get specific feedback from a marker who deals with this exam 4 times a year, that's the best way for you to improve your ability to pass this exam as quickly as possible. We also have a masterclass. So as an online company, we hold an online masterclass which you can sign up for, and it's a day over the weekend. We do the Saturday and a Sunday, and it's a full day's worth of we have an expert who takes an online seminar, and we go through everything specific to that case study that you can do to get prepared for the exam, and we cover all sorts. And it's very popular among students who like a one-on-one kind of classroom environment in an online situation. We also offer pass guarantee. So if you're unlucky enough to not pass your exam the first time round, then there's no worries, because we give you the option. If you choose a pass guarantee option, then as long as you hit all the minimum requirements that we ask and you don't pass, then you get access to our materials for the next sitting completely free of charge. So there's something that we're doing to try and get you. Hopefully, if you signed up to our course and you do everything that we say you should do, then you probably will pass first time. That tends to be the way it goes. But if you should be unfortunate, if it's a particularly tough exam, then we'll let you have another go for free. So that's it. Thanks again for watching. Remember, my name is James. You can find me on Facebook, James Nutting Astranti, where I'll be posting all sorts of information about the upcoming exam in February. Make sure you check that out because there's always something to talk about with regards to that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.